Marcus had always believed that some people were meant to drift through life without leaving much of a mark. At 32, he'd convinced himself he was one of them, standing in the faculty lounge of Lincoln Elementary on what should have been his final day as a substitute teacher. He stared at the resignation letter in his hands, already signed and dated. 6 months of covering for absent teachers had shown him one thing clearly. He wasn't cut out for this. The letter felt heavier than it should have as he walked down the hallway, lined with colorful student artwork and motivational posters that seemed to mock his decision. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished linoleum floors. In a few hours, summer break would officially begin, and Marcus would walk away from education forever, probably back to his old job at the warehouse where expectations were low and nobody depended on him for anything important. He was almost to the principal's office when he heard it, a soft sobbing coming from classroom 3B. Marcus paused, checking his watch. The building should have been empty by now, except for custodial staff. The crying continued, muffled but persistent, the kind that comes from someone trying hard not to be heard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus knocked gently on the doorframe. The crying stopped immediately. Inside, he found a small figure hunched over a desk in the back corner of the room. Emma Rodriguez, a third grader he'd taught briefly during Mrs. Patterson's absence in March. Her dark hair hung like a curtain around her face, and her backpack sat untouched beside her chair. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "School ended an hour ago." She looked up with red-rimmed eyes, quickly wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "My mom forgot to pick me up again." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen Emma before, always one of the last kids waiting in the pickup line, sometimes sitting alone long after the buses had pulled away. "Did you call her?" Emma nodded toward the classroom phone. The office lady tried. "Mom's phone goes straight to voicemail. She's probably at work." Setting his resignation letter on a nearby desk, Marcus pulled up a chair beside her. "What kind of work does your mom do?" "She cleans offices at night, sometimes during the day too when people need extra help." Emma's voice was small but matter-of-fact, as if she'd explained this many times before. "She says she's saving money so we can get our own apartment. Right now we live with my grandma, but grandma doesn't like noise, so I have to be really quiet all the time." Marcus remembered Emma from his brief time in her class. She was bright, always raising her hand with thoughtful questions, but quieter than most kids her age. Now he understood why. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since school ended. Maybe longer." She shrugged, trying to seem unbothered by it all. "It's okay, though. I have books." That's when Marcus noticed the worn paperback novels scattered across her desk, all of them several grade levels above what a third grader should be reading. "You like to read?" For the first time, Emma's face brightened slightly. "I love it. When I read, I can go anywhere. Sometimes I pretend I'm in the stories, you know? Like I'm Anne of Green Gables, or Ramona, or someone who has adventures." Marcus found himself sitting down properly, his resignation temporarily forgotten. "What's your favorite book?" "Bridge to Terabithia. I've read it 12 times. She held up the battered copy, its cover held on with tape. "My teacher last year, Mrs. Patterson, she let me borrow it from the classroom library. But then she got sick and had to leave, and the substitute teachers after that didn't really notice I had it." "Mrs. Patterson was a good teacher?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "The best. She made reading time feel like magic time. She would do all the voices when she read out loud. And she always asked us what we thought about the characters, like our opinions really mattered. She made me feel smart." Something in the way Emma said this last part made Marcus pause. "What do you mean?" Emma looked down at her hands. "Most teachers think I'm weird because I read too much and don't talk a lot. They act like something's wrong with me. But Mrs. Patterson said being quiet doesn't mean you don't have important things to say. She said some of the best thinkers in the world were quiet people who watched and listened before they spoke." Marcus felt that twist in his chest again, sharper this time. "She sounds like she understood you." "Yeah. But then she got really sick with cancer and couldn't come back. And now she's..." Emma's voice trailed off. Now she's what? She died last week. My mom told me yesterday. That's why I was crying. I wanted to send her a card to thank her for being nice to me, but now I can't. The resignation letter suddenly felt like a lead weight in Marcus's peripheral vision. Here was a kid who'd lost the one teacher who'd made her feel valued, sitting alone in an empty classroom because the adults in her life were too overwhelmed to remember her. And here he was, about to walk away from a job where he could potentially make a difference, simply because it felt too hard. Emma, can I ask you something? What made Mrs. Patterson special, besides the voices and asking your opinion? Emma thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. She saw me. Like, really saw me. Not just the quiet, weird kid in the back, but me. She knew I loved stories, and she would save books she thought I'd like. She knew I was good at helping other kids with reading, even though I was shy about it. And she never made me feel bad for being different. Marcus nodded slowly. That sounds pretty amazing. It was. I was going to be in her class again next year, but now... Emma shrugged, trying to hide her disappointment. Now I'll probably get Mr. Henderson. He's really strict and he doesn't like it when kids ask too many questions. My friend Sophia had him last year, and she said he made her feel dumb for not understanding math right away. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Emma absently flipping through her book while Marcus processed what she'd shared. Finally, he asked, "Would you like me to try calling your mom again?" "You can try, but she's probably still not answering. She works 2 jobs, and sometimes she gets so tired she falls asleep and forgets things. She doesn't mean to. She's doing her best." There was no resentment in Emma's voice, just acceptance and a maturity that seemed far too heavy for someone her age. Marcus tried the number listed in the school's contact system, but as Emma had predicted, it went straight to voicemail. He left a message, then tried the emergency contact numbers. No answer. "Looks like we might be here for a while," Marcus said, settling back into his chair. "Want to tell me about Bridge to Terabithia? What makes it so special?" Emma's entire demeanor changed. She sat up straighter, her eyes lighting up as she launched into an animated discussion of the book's themes, characters, and the way it handled difficult topics like friendship, imagination, and loss. Marcus found himself genuinely engaged, impressed by her insights and the sophisticated way she analyzed the story. "You know," he said when she finished, "you might be the first person I've met who's made me want to read that book. I always thought it might be too sad." "It is sad," Emma admitted, "but it's also beautiful. And it teaches you that even when bad things happen, the good stuff you shared with people doesn't just disappear. It stays with you and makes you stronger." Marcus felt something shift inside him as she spoke. That's a pretty wise way to look at things. Mrs. Patterson taught me that. She said books can teach us how to handle real life, but only if we're brave enough to think about them deeply. By the time Emma's mother finally arrived, looking frazzled and apologetic, it was nearly 6 o'clock. Marcus had spent the better part of 3 hours talking with Emma about books, school, and her dreams for the future. She wanted to be a librarian, she'd told him, so she could help other kids find the perfect stories and feel less alone. "I'm so sorry," Maria Rodriguez said as she rushed into the classroom. "I fell asleep between jobs and my phone died. This has never happened before, I swear." "It's okay, Mom," Emma said, gathering her books. "Mr. Marcus kept me company. We talked about literature." Maria looked surprised. "Literature?" Marcus stood up, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I've been subbing here this year. Emma is an exceptional student. You should be very proud." "Oh, I am," Maria said, shaking his hand gratefully. "She's always been my smart girl. Too smart sometimes, I think. She reads books I can't even understand." As they prepared to leave, Emma turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Marcus, are you going to be here next year?" Marcus glanced at his resignation letter, still sitting on the desk where he'd left it hours ago. "I'm not sure yet, Emma. Why?" "Because I think you'd be a really good teacher. Like Mrs. Patterson. You listen to kids like what we say matters." After they left, Marcus sat alone in the quiet classroom as the custodial staff worked in the hallway outside. He picked up his resignation letter, reading the words he'd written that morning about feeling inadequate, unprepared, and certain that he wasn't making any real difference. But Emma's words echoed in his mind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Mrs. Patterson hadn't been magical because she was perfect. She'd been special because she'd seen Emma for who she truly was and had taken the time to nurture that. Marcus realized that in 3 hours of genuine conversation, he'd learned more about effective teaching than in 6 months of struggling through lesson plans and classroom management techniques. He thought about Emma sitting alone, forgotten, in an empty classroom, and how many other kids might be sitting alone in various ways, waiting for someone to see them. Really see them. Marcus folded the resignation letter and slipped it into his pocket. He'd hold on to it for now, but he wouldn't be turning it in today. The next morning, Marcus found himself in the principal's office for a very different reason than he'd planned. Dr. Patricia Williams, Lincoln Elementary's principal, looked surprised to see him. "Marcus, I thought you were finishing up yesterday. Don't you start your new job at the warehouse next week?" "Actually, Dr. Williams, I wanted to talk to you about that. Is the 4th grade position still open? The one Mrs. Patterson had?" Dr. Williams leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "It is, but Marcus, that's a full-time, permanent position. It requires someone who's committed to being here for the long haul. Are you sure substitute teaching has prepared you for that kind of responsibility?" Marcus had spent most of the previous evening thinking about exactly that question. "I know I don't have much experience, and I know I've struggled this year with some of the basics. But I met a student yesterday who reminded me why I wanted to try teaching in the first place. I think I've been so focused on getting through each day that I forgot the most important part is connecting with the kids." "Which student?" "Emma Rodriguez. She's going into 4th grade next year." Dr. Williams's expression softened. "Ah, Emma. She's had a tough year losing Mrs. Patterson. Brilliant child, but she tends to get overlooked because she's so quiet." "That's exactly what I mean. Yesterday I saw how much she bloomed when someone just took the time to really listen to her. I want to be the kind of teacher who notices the kids who might otherwise slip through the cracks." Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a file folder. "The position comes with summer professional development requirements. You'd need to attend workshops on curriculum development, classroom management, and reading instruction. Are you prepared for that commitment?" "Yes, ma'am. More than prepared." "And Marcus, I have to be honest. Mrs. Patterson set a very high bar. The parents and students in that class are going to be comparing you to someone who was truly exceptional. That's not going to be easy." Marcus nodded. "I understand. But I think maybe that's exactly the challenge I need." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in what was now officially his classroom, unpacking boxes of books and supplies. The summer workshops had been intense, but enlightening, and he felt more prepared than he had since starting as a substitute. More importantly, he felt purposeful in a way he'd never experienced before. He was arranging a reading corner when he heard a familiar voice from the doorway. "Mr. Marcus? Is this really going to be your classroom?" Emma stood there with her mother, both of them looking surprised and pleased. Maria was carrying a small potted plant. "Emma!" "Yes, this is my classroom. I'll be your teacher this year." Emma's face broke into the biggest smile he'd seen from her. "Really? You decided to stay?" "I did. Actually, you helped me decide." Maria stepped forward, offering the plant. "It's a spider plant. Mrs. Patterson had one in her classroom, and Emma always loved how it made the room feel more alive. We thought maybe you could use one too." Marcus accepted the plant gratefully, setting it in a place of honor on his desk. "This is perfect." "Thank you both." As they toured the classroom, Emma chattering excitedly about the books she spotted, and the reading corner Marcus was creating, he realized something profound had shifted. The job no longer felt like something he was enduring or trying to survive. It felt like something he was building. Over the following weeks, as Marcus prepared for the new school year, he found himself thinking constantly about Emma and students like her. He researched teaching strategies for introverted learners, visited the public library to find books that might appeal to advanced readers, and even reached out to other teachers in the district who were known for their ability to connect with challenging students. When the first day of school arrived, Marcus felt nervous, but not the panicked, overwhelmed nervousness he'd experienced as a substitute. This was the anticipatory nervousness of someone who cared deeply about doing something well. Emma was one of the first students to arrive, carrying a new backpack and a stack of books. She'd grown over the summer, Marcus noticed, and seemed more confident as she chose a desk near the reading corner. "Good morning, Emma. How was your summer?" "Good!" "I read 14 books and helped my mom organize her work schedule so she won't forget to pick me up anymore. And guess what? We found our own apartment. It's small, but I have my own room, and Mom says I can paint it any color I want." "That's wonderful news. What color are you thinking?" "Library green, like the color of the walls in the children's section downtown. It makes me feel calm and happy at the same time." As the other students filtered in, Marcus watched Emma help orient some of the newer kids, quietly showing them where to put their backpacks and answering their questions. She was still reserved, but there was a gentle confidence about her that hadn't been there the year before. The first few weeks of school confirmed what Marcus had hoped. Teaching felt different when you approached it as an opportunity to know and nurture individual students rather than simply deliver curriculum. He made it a point to have genuine conversations with each child, to notice their interests and strengths, and to create opportunities for different types of learners to shine. Emma thrived in this environment. She became his unofficial assistant librarian, helping other students find books that matched their interests and reading levels. She started a lunchtime book club that grew from 3 members to 12 within a month. Most importantly, she began to find her voice, contributing thoughtfully to class discussions and even volunteering to read her creative writing aloud. But it was in October that Marcus truly understood the ripple effect of seeing and nurturing one child. Emma approached him after class one afternoon, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Well, you know how I help kids find books and stuff." Marcus nodded, settling into a student desk beside her. "There's this kid, Jake, in Mrs. Morrison's class. He's in 3rd grade, and he seems really sad all the time. He sits by himself at lunch and doesn't talk to anyone. Yesterday I saw him in the library just staring at books but not picking any up, like he wanted to read but didn't know how to start." Marcus felt a familiar twist in his chest. "What do you think might help Jake?" "I was thinking maybe I could introduce him to some really good starter books. Not baby books, but ones that are exciting, right from the first page. And maybe if he had someone to talk about them with, he might not seem so lonely." "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Emma. But can I ask what made you notice Jake in the first place?" Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Because he looks the way I used to feel. Like he's invisible and doesn't think anyone cares about what he's thinking or feeling. I remember what that was like, and I remember how different I felt when you and Mrs. Patterson made me feel like I mattered." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You know what, Emma? I think you're going to make an amazing librarian someday. And I think Jake is very lucky to have someone like you who notices when people need a friend. Will you help me pick out some good books for him?" "Absolutely." That afternoon, Marcus and Emma spent an hour carefully selecting a range of books that might appeal to a 3rd-grade boy who seemed lost and disconnected. Emma wrote a brief note introducing herself and explaining that she'd noticed Jake in the library and thought he might enjoy these stories. 2 weeks later, Marcus was walking past the library during his lunch break when he saw Emma and Jake sitting together at a small table, deep in animated conversation about a book. Jake was smiling, gesturing enthusiastically as he talked. Emma listened with the same patient attention Marcus remembered from their first conversation in the empty classroom. That evening, Marcus called his sister Rachel, who lived across the country. "You sound different," Rachel said after they'd caught up on family news. "Happier, maybe?" "More settled." Marcus looked around his apartment, which for the first time in his adult life felt like more than just a place to sleep between obligations. He'd hung student artwork on the walls and kept a stack of children's books on his coffee table, always reading ahead to find new stories to share with his class. "I think I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life," he said. "Oh yeah, what's that?" "Paying attention. Really paying attention to people, especially the ones who think nobody notices them. That's very zen of you, Marcus. But what does that actually mean? Marcus thought about Emma, thriving in her role as the class literary ambassador. He thought about Jake, who had started joining Emma's book club and was slowly coming out of his shell. He thought about Maria Rodriguez, who had sent him a thank you card, saying that Emma came home from school excited to learn for the first time in years. It means I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. By November, Marcus had hit his stride as a full-time teacher. His classroom had become a hub of literary activity, with students recommending books to each other, writing their own stories, and engaging in sophisticated discussions about themes and characters. The reading corner Emma had inspired him to create was constantly occupied, and he'd had to expand it twice to accommodate all the students who wanted to use it. But more than the academic success, Marcus was proud of the community that had developed in his classroom. Students looked out for each other, celebrated each other's achievements, and had learned to value different kinds of strengths. Emma had played a crucial role in fostering this culture, but Marcus realized that his own growth as a teacher had been equally important. He'd learned to slow down, to listen more than he spoke, and to look for the potential in every child rather than focusing on deficits or challenges. He discovered that teaching wasn't about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and creating space for students to find their own voices. The transformation wasn't just visible in his students. Marcus felt more confident and purposeful than he ever had in any job. He looked forward to Monday mornings and found himself staying late, not because he had to, but because he was genuinely excited about planning lessons and activities that would engage his students. One afternoon in December, Dr. Williams stopped by his classroom during planning time. "I wanted to check in with you, Marcus. How are you feeling about your first semester as a full-time teacher?" Marcus looked around his classroom, decorated with student projects and filled with evidence of engaged learning. "Honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else." "That's what I was hoping you'd say. I've had several parents specifically mention how much their children love your class. Emma Rodriguez's mother said her daughter talks about you in your classroom constantly. Apparently, Emma's convinced she wants to be a teacher now instead of a librarian." Marcus smiled. "She'd be incredible at either one. She has this gift for connecting with other kids and helping them feel valued." "Well, she learned that from somewhere. Drive?" Williams said meaningfully. "I wanted you to know that the district is impressed with what you've accomplished here. We're hoping you'll consider staying long-term." After Dr. Williams left, Marcus sat alone in his classroom, grading student journals. Emma's entry for that week was about a book she'd shared with Jake, and how exciting it was to watch someone discover a story they loved. She wrote about how helping other kids find books made her feel useful and important, and how she was learning that sometimes the best way to feel better about yourself was to help someone else feel better too. Marcus set down his pen and looked out the window at the December afternoon, snow beginning to fall on the playground where his students would play tomorrow. He thought about the resignation letter still folded in his desk drawer at home, a reminder of how close he'd come to walking away from all of this. The transformation in his life hadn't been dramatic or sudden. It had been built through small moments of connection, daily choices to see and value his students as individuals, and the gradual realization that teaching wasn't just his job, it was his calling. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, the teacher he'd never met, but whose legacy lived on in Emma's confidence and kindness. He hoped that someday, years from now, one of his students might carry forward the same spirit of nurturing and attention that Emma had shown him was possible. Marcus returned to grading, but his mind was already on tomorrow's lessons and the small ways he could continue to help his students feel seen, valued, and capable of making their own positive impact on the world around them. That evening, Emma's mother called to ask if Marcus might have time to meet for coffee during winter break. She had something she wanted to discuss with him. They met at a small cafe downtown, the same one where Marcus used to sit alone during his substitute teaching days, wondering if he'd ever find his place in the world. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Emma is a different kid than she was a year ago, more confident, more social, but still herself, you know? She talks about your class like it's the best part of her day." "Emma makes my job easy," Marcus replied. "She's got such a big heart and so much wisdom. I learn from her constantly." Maria smiled. "She told me something interesting last week. She said she's been thinking about what Mrs. Patterson would say about your classroom, and she thinks Mrs. Patterson would be proud because you're doing the same thing she did, making kids feel like they matter. Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his throat. That means more to me than you know. But here's the thing I really called you about, Maria continued. Emma wants to do something special for you for Christmas, and she asked me to help her. She's been saving her allowance money, and she wants to buy books for your classroom. Not just any books, but books specifically chosen for kids who might feel left out or different. She calls it the Mrs. Patterson Memorial Library Corner. Marcus had to set down his coffee cup to steady his hands. Maria, that's incredible. She's already picked out 12 books. I looked them up, and they're all stories about kids who don't fit in at first but find their place and their strength. She's written a little note to go with each one, explaining why she chose it and what she hopes the reader will get from it. That Christmas morning, Marcus opened Emma's gift in his empty classroom. 12 carefully chosen books, each with a handwritten note from Emma, explaining her reasoning and sharing insights that would make any literature professor proud. The final note, attached to a copy of Bridge to Terabithia, simply said, "Thank you for seeing me the way Mrs. Patterson did. I hope these books help you see other kids the same way. Love, your student and friend, Emma." Marcus arranged the books in a special section of the reading corner, along with a small sign that read, "Mrs. Patterson Memorial Collection, Stories for Every Kind of Reader." When school resumed in January, Emma found the display and burst into tears of joy. "It's perfect," she whispered. She would have loved this. As the spring semester progressed, the memorial collection became one of the most popular sections of the classroom library. Students gravitated toward the books Emma had chosen, often finding exactly the story they needed at exactly the right moment in their lives. Marcus watched Jake, now a confident fourth grader after being held back a year, help a shy new student find a book from Emma's collection. He saw Emma, now in 5th grade but still volunteering in his classroom during her study hall, mentor younger students with the same patience and insight Mrs. Patterson had shown her. The cycle of seeing, nurturing, and empowering continued, rippling outward in ways Marcus could never have imagined when he'd first considered leaving teaching. On the last day of school that year, Emma stopped by his classroom one final time before moving on to middle school. "Mr. Marcus, I have something to tell you." "What's that, Emma?" "I've decided I definitely want to be a teacher. Like you and Mrs. Patterson, I want to help kids who feel invisible feel like they matter." Marcus smiled, remembering his own moment of decision in this very classroom 2 years earlier. "I think you'll be an amazing teacher, Emma. You already are in so many ways. Will you write me a recommendation letter when I apply to college? It would be my honor." As Emma walked away, headed toward whatever adventures middle school would bring, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him to this moment. He'd started as someone drifting through life, convinced he had little to offer the world. But one conversation with one lonely child had changed everything, showing him that the most profound impact often comes from the simplest act of truly seeing another person. The resignation letter still sat in his desk drawer at home, but now it served a different purpose. It reminded him of how close he'd come to missing his calling, and how grateful he was every day that Emma Rodriguez had been sitting in that empty classroom, crying, and waiting for someone to notice her. Years later, when Emma graduated valedictorian from the local high school and received a full scholarship to study education, Marcus would be in the audience cheering. When she became a teacher herself and started her own version of the Mrs. Patterson Memorial Library Corner in her first classroom, he would be the first person she called to share the news. But on that last day of his second year as a full-time teacher, Marcus simply locked up his classroom and walked home through the late spring afternoon, knowing that he'd found exactly where he belonged. He'd learned that sometimes the most important moments in life aren't the ones we plan or strive for, but the ones that find us when we're brave enough to pay attention to the people around us who need to be seen. The warehouse job he'd almost taken was forgotten, replaced by a career that challenged him daily but never left him feeling empty. He'd discovered that making a difference didn't require grand gestures or exceptional talents. It just required showing up, paying attention, and treating every person you encounter as if they matter. Because they do. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.